Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity to be up here. I'm looking forward to having some fun.
We're just going to hand out the questionnaire for the CEUs if you want it. If you don't want it, just tell them.
Okay. And this is my home area. I grew up on the South Shore. I've been down in Virginia for a while, but it's good to get up here where everybody understands what I'm saying. You'd be surprised. And also, because I'm from up here, I will make one commitment that I'm only going to use one four-letter word tonight, and that is open. So anyways, let's talk about open systems, open protocols, interoperability. It is not a simple subject. We've been talking about it for years, but we still need to continue to talk about it. Paul, this is not. There we go. All right, so we ought to start with some definitions to get going. I mean, the reason we talk about open systems is because we want to accomplish interoperability. So, what do we mean by that? And tonight you get my definitions, like it or not, right? The process of combining different systems together so they can do something useful. Share data, coordinate control actions, provide a unified user interaction with the system, right? That's interoperability. Well, you can accomplish this even without open systems. Even without standard protocols. There's just one minor problem. It's a lot more work, okay? But it's done pretty regularly. So let's talk about then open systems. What do we mean by that? And my definition for us tonight is products that include a documented communication interface to support methods to enable connection and communication. It's open. It might include an industry standard. That's a separate topic, right? Or it might just be a proprietary interface that I have, but I've documented and said you can use it, okay? So open does not necessarily mean standards-based, and I think that's especially important that we talk about that with the advent of the Internet of Things and all the other devices that are flying into our market. They don't necessarily follow a standard we're familiar with, right, in the controls industry, but they're still open. There's an open way to get communication. And then the topic we're most familiar with, right, in our industry is open protocols, right? Communication protocols and data exchange methods or interfaces that are based on standards, right? Most of those are managed, driven by, controlled by some type of non-commercial entity. Ashtray with BACnet, Oasis with Obix, the Modbus organization that's grown up around Modbus. New one I'll mention later, Haystack. Of course, we have Lawn Talk, which is the standard protocol that runs on Echelon LawnWorks networks, and that happens, Lawn Talk is an ANSI standard. But then you get stuff from the other side, from the IT industry. You have SNMP, Simple Network Management Protocol. You want to get data out of a computer room, out of a rack server, out of those things, you're going to be talking that protocol. Okay? And then OPC, strong in the industrial market, some use in the building automation. And then DALI, one of the standards in the lighting industry. Okay? I would say this is what we typically talk about, but the topic is bigger than this. Open means more than one thing, and if we want to meet the needs of owners and building operators who expect things, we need to understand what do they expect, right? So device connectivity, being able to put a Johnson device, a Honeywell device, a Siemens device, Schneider device together on a network so they can communicate over BACnet or Lawn Talk, Modbus or Obix, that is part of the open challenge, part of it, okay? And I would say that if people say I want an open protocol, that's what they mean, okay? But oftentimes that may not actually allow them to achieve what their goals are. The next type of open is around APIs, application programming interface, a way for software applications to communicate with each other. So that I could write a third-party software application that could connect to that building automation system and get data from it, and I could do wonderful things with my software application. Okay? But that's a totally separate layer of integration, different types of technologies that may or may not be based on standards. And most often are not based on the widely accepted standards we know in the building automation industry. And this is important because we'll talk about this. This is, in my opinion, this is probably the key area of new value creation for owners, for system integrators, for engineers, is how can applications connect to these systems and create value for all of us in the value chain from the owner on down. Okay. And then a part we don't think about that much, right? What about open for purchasing, for acquiring a product, right? Is the product openly available, or is it tightly controlled? Is there only one system integrator or other company in an area that you can buy from, right? Removes competition. So where you can get it is a very fundamental part of open and achieving those goals that we know that the owners are after, right? Okay? So can I get it for initial purchase of the system? Do I have multiple suppliers who can apply it, put it in my building? And then there's another side of it is for service, right? You know, there's a lot of Dodge dealers around here. If I don't like you, I could go to you, right? And if my car's under warranty, you'll honor it too, because you'll hope you'll sell my next car. Can I do that? Can I get service from more than one organization, especially outside the warranty period? I mention these because my experience over the years, these are actually what oftentimes the owner thought they got, or expected to get, or needs to be explained they're not getting, right? Okay? And then there's whole different other aspects that we have to consider. Open database compatibility. Can I use standard software tools from the IT industry, the accepted software databases? Can I use those with my system? In other words, does the system actually use one of those standards? Or does it have an interface that would allow me to use it if I want? Or and this are examples I've seen, system uses BACnet, all that stuff, and you can't get any data out to store it in any other way, right? Because the database technology is proprietary. Why does this matter? Well, it goes back to our conversation about value-added applications and using these systems to do more than just turn the lights on, right? So, examples are, you know, an open source, there's something called MySQL. There's Microsoft SQL, of course. And then there are techniques and standards in that industry. Open database connectivity, Java database connectivity. Does the database support those types of interfaces, right, from the IT and software world? Those become very important for a lot of the things that owners want to accomplish. But there's more, right? And I increasingly see this come up, and I would say, you know, missed expectations here is, because the software world, you hear a lot about open source, people think, oh, I bought an open system, that means it's open source. No, it does not mean that. It would be extremely rare to see that. Open source, the software source code is publicly available, published. And I can use it, modify it, and change it under some well-defined license. There's called the academic free license, there's the GNU license, there's stuff. So the source code is published. And you know what, while I'm not aware of any, and maybe someone in here will correct me, I'm not aware of any open source building automation systems, there are lots of ancillary tools and products that can be used with systems that are now open source, okay? So that's an important thing, and again, we need to think about that to make sure when we say open, we know what we're talking about, or we know what we are, that the person listening knows what we're talking about, right? Examples from the IT world, there's a thing called Apache. I believe it's the world's most popular web server. That's open source. MySQL is an open source database. OpenOffice is open source suite of office tools. In the BAS world, or the controls and sensor world, there's a new effort called Project Haystack, which is open source tools for tagging data. We're going to talk about that a little bit more because it hits us in another area where open matters. And then this one is overlooked and may be the crux of the issue. Open programming, right? Can someone other than the original installer or manufacturer actually do anything to the system? Change a control sequence, make fundamental changes to the control algorithms. You can have a product that communicates with open protocol, BACnet, LAN talk, whatever, allows me to get the data out through an open API, but can't be programmed except with some very specialized tool that is either not made available or is made available through some level of difficulty, all right? And there may be reasons for this, by the way, right? If you have a control system that is what we'd call a kind of a pre-engineered appliance, right? You probably don't want somebody mucking around with the programming. Example, right? I buy a boiler and it's got a controller on it. Cleaver Brooks probably doesn't want me going in there and changing the sequences and the safeties, you know. Might be a problem with that. So the programming tool might be well controlled, might be very defined, might be very limited. Problem is people think they apply that to building automation. They think, well, I bought it, it's an open system, it's BACnet, so I can go in and program it. Maybe not, right? Not only the tool, but the knowledge of how to use the tool. So again, a whole additional facet that could be the issue that makes the customer unhappy or concerned that we need to understand and factor in. But now the new stuff, the current edge of where technology is going, open communities. And by this we mean, can an independent ecosystem of people get together and say, I'm going to build apps for that system? Can I build apps for that manufacturer system? Do they allow that? Right? Not only legally, but do they allow it with support for an open community? Well, now, we're all living with this. I doubt anybody in here doesn't have a smartphone, okay? So you're either most likely Apple or Android, and there are open communities around that, right? There are hundreds of thousands of apps you can get. And those apps are created by a community because there are defined APIs, and I could say, I'm going to write the best app for pick a thing. And that drives change in the industry. That raises the bar, right? A manufacturer may not have come up with some app to do something with their system, but if three smart people in a garage get together and come up with it, that could give the industry, customers and users, new capabilities that they want. So this open community thing is a really big deal, and I think a lot of manufacturers are struggling with how do they deal with this, because they have that thing over control, right? Okay. But enabling the growth of communities to accelerate. I think this is what you see coming out of Silicon Valley, right? Where they come out with a different ethos, a different set of expectations that a bunch of people can get together and say, I'm building an app to do this. And they say, well, let's do it for buildings and energy. And then they run into some of these other issues, which can really slow down or stop the progress, right? So if you're going to support open communities, you need to allow developers access to things so that they can build apps, they could build tools, they could do integrations, they could write algorithms, both external to the product and in. So let's think about that. I want to build an app that communicates with a BAS so that I can show off prettier charts and graphs than the manufacturer provides. That's cool. That's an external app, and if there is an open API, I could do that. Well, let's go inside. Can I build apps that actually reside inside that controller? And as Brian mentioned, you know, that's one of the things that we accomplished at Tritium. Software developers could write apps that actually loaded inside that controller, okay? And that was pretty revolutionary, and I would say still of limited availability that you can write apps that will actually go inside controllers. I don't mean a control sequence, I mean an app. I dreamed up an app and I want to put it in there, okay? Now, to make this work, there may be need for certification. You can't just put anything up in the Apple Store. You have to get approved and certified. But you know what? It's not random. No one arbitrarily stops the development of these apps. There's rules, there's certifications, but they're well known and they're published, right? So that's still an open community, even if there are certification hurdles you have to do, okay? Financial transactions may be involved, right? Apple gets a share of everything that gets sold through the store. That could happen, and I believe that will be a big part of the future of our industry, right? All right, so coming back around before we go into the next topic is, you know, obviously the benefits, right? Why? We've been talking about this for years. Well, Mr. Owner, you can purchase best of breeds products, and they have the best VAV box controller, and they have the best airflow sensors, and you can stick them all together and they're going to work. It's a good thing, right? Because the days when any single line manufacturer had the best product across, you know, the best option at every part of their product line, it's not a reality. A lot of them, though, want to eliminate vendor lock-in, and that gets to a lot of the other issues we talked about, especially the tools, the programming, the data, the software interfaces. But I think the other two, oftentimes, having been in the BMS industry, I've heard from owners who think that it was all, we all schemed at night of how to lock them in, I don't know. I haven't met the people that were that intelligent. I think it more just kind of happened myself, There was some of it. But I think the last two are evolutionary, right? I want to combine my control system with a software application that nobody else ever thought of, right? It isn't because the manufacturer's trying to lock it down. Somebody else thought of something really cool that could be added, right? Or I want to combine products together that the manufacturer never envisioned, that these things would be brought together. Well, if I have open protocols and tools and APIs, then I can accomplish these things and create new value, which moves the industry forward. Competition and lower cost for the owner, obviously that's a major factor, right? But creativity is a real issue. We see the rapid creativity, and I know one of the questions was posed, how come some of the other parts of the world are so open and moving so fast and building automation systems are so far behind? Well, if you have open systems, those three people in a garage can get together, use their creativity, and create something that wasn't there before. If you don't, they can't do that. The final one, and I want to spend a little bit of time on this, is data. The data from all these systems has proven to be a tangible, valuable asset. So if I want my data, all of these things matter to me, and I want to spend a little bit of time talking about data, okay? The newest benefit of open and one that requires us to think about all of these facets of open if we're going to actually be able to use the data, right? So I'm sure we're all hearing about big data, where, the great buzzword of the last couple of years, but what's it mean in buildings and what's it mean to owners and operators? So I think this is the biggest reason that data is an important topic. If we have data, you can use analytic tools to look at the data and basically find patterns that mean something, find patterns that are valuable, that a valve will no longer close off, so I'm simultaneously heating and cooling. Like an economizer isn't closing because there's a dead crow stuck in it, right? Actually, see that happen, okay? Like I'm expecting 8 degrees of delta T across the coil, I'm only getting 4, which is perfectly fine on a shoulder season day. Not going to be so good in July, right? Those patterns have a lot of value to us, and there's all of these analytic tools now available coming from a lot of different places. But you know what they need? They need data. So if I can't get the data, then I can't take advantage of this. And so we see this driving an important part of the discussion about open. I would say I'm seeing the open discussion that, that we're talking about tonight resurge in interest because there's so many facets and this is a new one, okay? And part of the reason is, if I've already invested in this system, I have it sitting there, it's got data in it, it's like, hey, it should be easy for me to add analytics. I already paid for it. Give me my data. I already paid for it, right? Okay. So the new uses for data, the new value for data, actually highlights a new requirement around open, right? So if you want to take advantage of the data, the real issue is how much does it cost to do that, right? Because if I say, hey, I could add this magical thing to your system and it'd save you $25,000 a year, but it costs $1 million, you're going to show me the door really quick, right? So the hurdle, the difficulty, the challenges in getting data have a real bearing on being able to make value out of that data, because value means it's got to be more than the cost I put into it, right? And this opens up a whole new topic around open. We've talked about the database, so we can get it, store it, get it out of a standard way. We talked about it, application programming interfaces and the protocols, but there's a new challenge here, okay? How can I make it more streamlined to get the data? So open and difficult is almost the same as not open. Open and easy, that's what people are really thinking when they ask about this, right? So I want to introduce you to some new concepts. If you're going to use data, you're going to run into new concepts called data semantics, okay? Data modeling, metadata, data mapping, data wrangling. All of these are facets of the challenge of using data. And what we're really talking about is understanding what data means. So let me give you an example, okay? Let's say somebody says, hey, John, you're a real smart guy, huh? Well, I want you to go analyze this for me. And I look at it. I don't know what you meant by that name, Fred. Come on. What were you doing when you came up with that name? Meant something to you, means nothing to me, okay? And 76.2, pennies, kW, degrees Fahrenheit, kilopascals, right? And so this is obvious, but it gets us to the point. Numbers have no meaning without units. Brian, I'm going to give you 100 later tonight, okay? $100? 2 rolls of pennies, right? So we're all familiar that you have to have units to make the numbers meaningful. Units are a descriptor that allows us to understand numbers. But it goes forward. So let's say you tell me, yeah, John, sorry, I forgot to tell you that's 76.2 degrees Fahrenheit. Now go analyze it. And now my next question is, well, wait a minute, what is it? Is it the temperature in this room? Because if it is, it's getting a little warm. But if it's that return air sensor, it's like right on the money, right? If it's chill water supply temperature and it's summer, you know, that's not good. So you tell me, oh, it's a zone temperature. Okay. You know what, though? I need to know more information. What schedule is associated with that sensor? Because at 3 a.m. in the cooling season on setback, 76.2, no problem. At 9 a.m., when all those cranky lawyers come into their space and expect it to be comfortable, the phones are going to be ringing, right? So what is the association of the schedule? And what air handler is it served by? Okay? So if I was going to analyze that, I'd have to get all this information from you. And you know what? You're a building expert. You've lived in the building. You know every one of these answers. Okay? But now I'm trying to connect to that system without you. I'm pulling the data out, and it has beautiful names like this. How am I going to figure this out? Well, that introduces the concept of data modeling, data mapping, data semantics. And there is a new open source initiative, open source, one of our topics, where a community of people, worldwide community of people, numbering right about 1,000 right now, are coming together to define a markup language for data. Descriptors I can add. So that when I look at this thing, thank you for the wonderful name, but it would be followed by a whole bunch of descriptors that would tell me what it is. It's degrees Fahrenheit, it's a zone temperature, and it has associated with it a schedule. And this is what a representation of this type of data looks like. And again, this is key to open, effective use of data. So it has a unique ID. Everything in the world has a unique ID, right? It has a name. There's Fred's name. Okay? And then it says, hey, it's a sensor. It's an air sensor. It's a temperature sensor. It's in degrees Fahrenheit. Here's its current value. It's on this piece of equipment, an equipment reference. It's on this site, and it's got this schedule. All conveyed in a consensus-approved, but open source group of tags. And if you're familiar at all with HTML, it's a markup language for the web. Well, Project Haystack is a markup language for the data that comes out of our systems so that we can more effectively use it. Now, I said it comes out, so you got to be able to get it out. But if you can get it out, then this is the next problem you run into, okay? So, open source community, it includes tagging models, an online forum where people come and discuss these challenges, and you know, I'm an expert on chillers, so here are the points and here are the tags, and we debate it out, and then it gets consensus approved, okay? And it includes a protocol that'll even carry that, and it includes APIs, and again, it's all open source. You don't even have to register. You can go and download everything the community has ever done with 3 clicks and walk away, right? And here's an example, right? Another name, more conventional than the last one, but you know, HU1-SAT, we've all seen a name like that, and you know what we know? If we get to read it, we know what it means, but if a computer's reading it, it doesn't know what it means, right? So that's the original point name. But the tags say, hey, I'm a sensor, I'm a discharge, I'm an air, I'm a temp, I'm degrees Fahrenheit, and then you have a thing called an association tag that says my reference is Air Handling Unit 1. Okay? And this is at the forefront of solving the challenges of making data not only open, but open cost effectively so that it can be utilized and people can build apps. Now I can build an app, and if the system I'm talking to uses this tagging methodology, my app can interpret automatically everything about it. Okay? And this is the future that's going to have dramatic impact on us. What kind of impacts? Well, we like to say applications that just work. And here's a real-world example. Okay? As Brian nicely mentioned, I've been around a while. Thanks, Brian. Okay? Okay? Yeah, I'll give you the 100, all right. But no, I'll give you an example that I'm sure you can relate to. When I started in building automation, there were no such thing as color graphics. The color was green, the screen was black, and everything was text. And that is how you managed multi-million square foot office buildings with 1,000-ton chillers. And it seemed like we could still make them run, huh? Okay? But then the world got smart and we added all these color graphics, right? Make it easier for people. And of course, so then they had to be 3D, and then the fan had to spin, and then it has to be properly shaded with the light from the right direction. Well, you just got my opinion on graphics. But anyways, they're not going away. We need them. But, and if anybody wants to answer this question, we can leave it rhetorical or someone can ask. If you had a control system and it required 100 hours to do the controls, like so the lights would come on and the temperature, how many hours would it require to do the graphics for the thing? Anybody want to give me a number? 100 hours to do the control programming. How many hours for the graphics? 1,000. Yeah, I
250.
yeah, but okay, that's the point. What if, and this happens today by products that are using tagging, what if the graphics engine can interpret the points and go, oh, air handler 1, these are all associated, here's the discharge, here's the return, here's the, and the graphic auto-assembles. That's doable today because of a couple things, right? You got to be able to get the data, so it's got to be open, but the data also has to be marked up in an open standard way so that software can interpret it. I don't have to ask you which points are associated with air handler 1. Software will figure it out. Hope you're planning to retire. I don't need you anymore. All right? Also easier integration with external applications, right? We want to combine this app and this app and this app. Do we actually want to have to sit down and tell the software what every single point means? Okay? For my world, this is essential for analytics. I want to get the data out of the building. I want to know what it is. I want to look for patterns and problems and faults. Well, if I have to spend 10 times as much effort to figure out what the points are, then probably not going to make a sale. Also a new generation of engineering tools that are fundamentally based on tagging so they automatically can do things for you. Similar things happen on the construction side with BIM, where there's a standard modeling language for the components that go into a building. There's dramatically changing the engineering process for construction. Haystack is for the operational side of the life of a building. And it's tied into that. Yeah?
When you talk about the engineering tools, does that extend to the controls design engineer who's sitting at PC building the drawings and building the design?
It hasn't yet, but that's where it is. The graphic stuff is real. The analytics stuff is real. The tools to program the BAS more quickly are. What has to happen next is move into the designer's tools.
They're naming the point
Yes.
as they're doing it, and they know.
Exactly, and they know what it is. Give you a good example. If you people say, well, tagging sounds like a lot of work. And I'd say, well, wait a minute now. To add those tags when I'm already doing the design, okay, it took me 2 extra minutes. To add those tags 2 years later when nobody knows what's what, agreed. Hours and hours and hours, you know. When we talk to people about this and the need for tagging, they say, well, how am I going to go about it? We say, well, you sit down with a points list. And I've had some people go, what's a points list? And I, whoa, right? It's not a joke. This happens because, you know, that's been kind of like a lost art. Well, it's back in the design. You knew the points. Nobody else knows what they are, right? This has to be captured if we're going to efficiently build, control, run, manage buildings, and do new stuff with them over their life, okay? So, Project Haystack, it's out there on the web. And, you know, this is not commercial. It's a 501c, nonprofit, open source. Again, everything is freely available. You don't even have to sign up for an account. And you've got years, it was founded in 2011, early 2011. You've got years of work by a community where they've come together and they built these agreed upon tagging libraries to mark up data. And if we all use them, then the data just magically works with dramatically less effort, okay? And it's a key part of the open challenge. So, as I warned you at the beginning, open is a very big four-letter word, right? It's more important than ever to run our buildings efficiently over their life cycle, right? But we have to define what it means for our application. If I'm talking about building some app for a phone, it means is there an API I can pull some data out? I actually don't care whether the controllers on the network can be combined from Johnson, Honeywell, Schneider, and Siemens. Well, okay. As long as there's an API to get into the head end, the network controller, I don't care about all that stuff. So I could have a closed system with an open API and I could build my apps, right? So people need to be informed. Designers, engineers, control people. For owners, which we often talk, understand and then demand the level of openness you need to achieve what you want to achieve, right? You can add stuff to existing systems that have proprietary networks or devices to make them open from the network controller level out to gain a lot of these benefits without throwing away the stuff that's in the building, right? You may not have solved the open tool, you may not have solved the multi-vendor servicing, but you could move forward with applications, value-added applications, by getting the data out. And there's a lot of options out there, obviously, right? So what is an owner to do, right? Understand the different facets. Understand which ones apply to what you care about or have a viable opportunity to do anything about, right? Clearly define your requirements. And then the final one, which we were talking about in the hall here, ensure that the procurement process actually allows you to get what you asked for. I have seen many projects over the year where everything was fine until it was handed over to a procurement system that actually worked against getting what the owner had spent all the money designing, specifying to get destroyed in the procurement process, right? And then the owner goes, hey, I thought I was getting an open system. But you didn't. And they track it down, and of course that means it's my fault or Brian's fault or something. So, anyways, that's what I wanted to talk about around open. I think we got time for questions, and I know there were a couple posed. We can get to those, but let's take the ones in the room. So we'll start here.
Is there a tool that bridges that gap that Andy brought up? Is Revit going to bridge that, or is there something out there?
Okay, great question. So Project Haystack, and I happen to be on the board of directors of the project. In 2013, we held our first conference, and one of our keynote speakers was from AutoCAD, sharing the vision that this has to happen, and I describe it crudely as today, right now, all that BIM has taken over the construction world. Agreed? Okay. But what happens? Exaggeration? Well, maybe a little bit. At the end of the BIM process, they sweep all the stuff into a bucket and throw it away, and then we're in the control, and we start all over. What's the piece of equipment? What point? It doesn't make it across. It just goes away, right? The vision is there. I believe that they are focusing on that. They've got some on their website, which is humongous. You can actually find some research projects they've done around the concept, okay? And the whole idea is we can collapse wasted cost and time out of the entire life cycle and not hurt anybody. This is wasted work, right? So they spoke at the meeting. They see it. I don't know that it does it yet. What we're seeing, what I see from my vantage point is control system manufacturers are adopting this. Value-added software application providers, they're rapidly adopting it because without it, it's really hard. The cost barrier to get going, kind of the friction, the hurdle is very high. Yeah?
Just a question about back to controllers and open. It strikes me that the Sedona class of controllers is the most open that I've encountered. Do you agree with that? And where do you see Sedona?
Yeah, okay, so I would agree with that. I was at Tritium at the time, but one of the things I can say is it was a non-commercial project, which was pretty revolutionary for us to say, okay, for small devices, there needs to be an open source control application. The control engine, the way the variables are handled, the tool, all of that. And we released that to the world. had a role in doing that, and it is the most, in fact, well, I wouldn't say it's the only. There are in the industrial market, there's a thing called IEC 1164, I believe, if I remember the nut. And in fact, we hired one of the original founders of IEC 1164 to consult with us on Sedona. Okay? So in the BAS industry, it is. I can't give you anything on where it is going. I actually seen two things happening with it. I've seen the company that launched it downplaying, just not mentioning it. But I've seen yeah. I'm trying to be nice. They're recording me. Come on.
It's actually not open source, but it's freely available programming.
It's open source.
But it is also open source.
So it's open source. I think one of the places people get confused is up until this year, the only programming tool you could use to program one came from Tritium because they were the only ones who built one. But there's two others out there now. Okay, Contemporary Controls, and I think EasyIO has one. Okay, so I've seen less emphasis from Tritium Honeywell, but I've seen a resurgence in emphasis by the people who are making products based on it, especially now that they're freed and there's open programming tools. Okay, question?
John, can you comment on the security issues? One of our biggest challenges we're faced is, which side of the firewall, the whole idea of security, the whole idea of the cloud, it's preventing us from doing some really good, neat things. Could you just comment on your view of that situation?
Yeah, I'll offer some comments, no, not an answer. Okay, it's a big difference. Comments are, one of the problems we have is a lot of the protocols these systems are based on predate understanding security and baking it in. So you have a system, pick the protocol, and the way you make it secure is by adding a black box in front of it, a firewall, because the native protocol, the original protocol doesn't support advanced security techniques, right? Like SSL and TLS and those types of things. And it's interesting. You would think that the well-known risks to security would cause a pretty strong revolution in time to move forward to Generation 2 protocols. I still see it lagging, right? Now, BACNet's working on the next version they call BACnet Extended Web Services, if I have it correct. And that includes a new security model and stuff there. But we also have to ask ourselves, those of us who've been around for a while, how long will it take before it's out there regularly? And what do we do about all the buildings where it isn't? And what people do is they put some type of interposing device. Remember interposing relays? We're still doing it. They're just different. They're interposing black boxes that handle the security and keep all the insecure protocols non-exposed to the outside world. Related to that, do you remember when the big rage was put all the control systems on the same backbone as the IT? Now, run a separate backbone for the control systems. It's still Ethernet, it's still IP, but don't commingle them. This wiring's a lot cheaper too, but now it's moving exactly the opposite direction. So, any others? You had one that was submitted. Somebody submitted one. And I was going to show off how much I knew by answering it, but I had to go to somebody else. But somebody had posted a question online, I guess you had set up, about Stafa Talon controllers, so I'm guessing somebody was looking to buy them or whatever. So anyway, someone asked, are Stafa Talon controllers open? Well, we haven't got time to go through all those facets, but I'll answer some questions because I actually did talk to somebody who was pretty intimately familiar with that stuff. And Stafa Talon came out in 2003, and the first generation of Raptor controllers were based on LawnWorks networks. Right? So are they open? No, because they didn't use LawnTalk. They used a proprietary implementation of protocol on top of the LawnWorks network. Huh? You like that? Okay. The next generation of Predator controllers did use LawnMark, so they were an open protocol. Okay? And the most recent Talon stuff is BACnet, MSTP or BACnet IP, so they are. So anyways, and the older stuff, the Smart 2, was proprietary. But remember one of my first slides? Just because it's proprietary, not based on a standard, doesn't mean you can't interface to it, because there's lots of communication drivers out there for Stafa Smart 2 stuff. So you can interface to it. So anyways, other questions? Yeah.
In my experience, when you buy, when a mechanical contractor buys rooftop with factory control on them, when you get drivers and
Yeah.
your ability to execute the sequences that the engineer has asked you to do is frequently taxed.
Is frequently what?
It's frequently taxed. It's hard to do what they
I,
really
I thought that's where you were going, because I thought I was going to have to argue with you.
what the owner wants to do or what you figure out.
Yeah, I know, because they pre-can that stuff at lowest cost.
So how much of what you've been talking about today do you really see as making that change in a way that the boxes that come into play?
Yeah, so the challenge, you know, I'll give you an example that'll help kind of anchor that thought. You know, there's a lot of, and we'll leave brands out of it, systems that had BACnet, but they would only expose like a quarter of their points via BACnet, right? So if you wanted the other ones, you couldn't have them. So did I get an open, yeah, you got an open system, but I can't get my data. Well, sorry. And you know what my understanding, Joe, is cost, right? They had to drive the cost down. That would take more RAM. That would take more memory. That would take a better processor. Nobody really wants it. Some great guys sat around and say, well, we only need to expose these 25 points or whatever the number is via BACnet. And we're living with thousands of those devices out there, right? And if you can't access them, then you can't do intelligent supervisory sequences like what the engineer wrote the spec for, that any, you know, wow, great spec. Great control sequence, except you can't implement it because you can't talk to the point. I had a recent example. Again, brand stays out of it, but somebody using our software was trying to get at, you know, what would you think would be a really important piece of data out of a VAV box? Airflow. That was one of the ones not made available. It was used internally to do the control, but you couldn't actually read it out of the box. Felt really bad for the system integrator who got involved in that because he had no idea, and it caused him a lot of pain. Yeah.